Hey guys, welcome back to more Entitled Parents family drama stories. In this video, I was kicked out of my house at 15 and told I was worthless. 15 years later, I am a successful business owner and suddenly my abusive parents want my children. When I blocked them, they escalated from false CPS reports to literal kidnapping. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one is titled, "My entitled family wants to take my kids and give them to my brother." So I, 35 male, worked my way out of an abusive childhood. I had an older brother and my parents made it seem like I was the oops pregnancy and was not wanted. My brother could do no wrong in their eyes, so whenever he did something bad, he blamed it on me and I was then punished for it. As I got older, my parents became verbally and psychologically abusive, constantly berating me, telling me that I was worthless. I was denied food, had my room taken away because I didn't deserve it, and was not given new clothing when mine started to fall apart or get small. The only stable thing I had in my life was school, and I would try and stay there for as long as I could, joining after-school clubs and attending tryouts for teams that I didn't want to be a part of. When I would get home later in the afternoon, my family wouldn't care and sometimes would be out of the house doing something fun with my brother and expecting me to have dinner ready when they got home. When I was 15, my family kicked me out of the house, claiming I wasn't pulling my weight even though I was not able to start working for another year. I thought about dropping out of school and getting a job so that I would at least have money for food, but one of my teachers figured out what was going on. There wasn't much she was able to do since my parents had not legally given up their rights, but she helped me get resources and find places that I could get free or discounted meals at. Due to my age and situation, I was able to learn about emancipation, which would allow me to make my own decisions without having to try and find a loophole or a way to try and contact my parents. I requested the proper forms and worked with a lawyer from family court that helped me fill out everything. In my state, there's a 30-day window between when emancipation forms are submitted to a judge and the judge's decision on whether to hold a hearing to discuss the petition further, approve it or deny it, and I got very lucky. Apparently, when my parents were contacted by the court regarding a hearing, they insisted that whatever I wanted to do was fine with them, and the judge received signed permission from them a few days later, and I was able to be truly free from them. I worked from the moment I turned 16, I saved up money, and when I started making enough hourly, I got a credit card and worked to build up my credit in order to get an apartment. I began taking courses at a local community college and fell in love with computer technology. I worked as a lower-level support worker for one of the largest tech companies in my city and continued to learn and grow to make it up to a senior management position. When I felt comfortable with my knowledge, I branched out to become the owner of my own tech consulting firm. I met my wife Lucy and her family when I was in my 20s. They became my surrogate family, showing me what a real family was supposed to look like, and we got married a few years later and had a beautiful set of twins who are now 7 years old. I tried to contact my family when I got married, but they didn't show up to the wedding, which was fine with me. After the birth of the twins, I tried one last time but never got so much as a phone call. They made no effort to reach out to me after I left the house, so I figured that the 2 chances I gave them were enough of a courtesy to cut ties with them altogether. That changed last year. At the beginning of August, I got a certified letter from my parents' lawyer requesting that I meet with them regarding a concern about their grandchildren. It was weird that they were reaching out without much notice. I assumed that they wanted to have a discussion about their will or something like that, so I hired my own lawyer to go with me to the meeting. Instead of just my parents and their lawyer, I was met with my parents and my brother, but no lawyer in sight. They asked me to send my lawyer out so that we could have a talk, but I refused, claiming that anything they wanted to say could be heard by my lawyer too. My brother flat out asked me if I would consider giving up my kids to him. He told me that he and his wife finalized their divorce a few months ago and that he lost custody of his own children, and he wanted to show her that he could take care of his family and wanted to use my kids to do it. I flat out refused. After years of not having any contact with me, all of a sudden my brother wanted my kids to live with him? My parents were supporting my brother through his explanation, telling me that I should consider it because of the sacrifices that my brother had to make. It felt like I was back in their house. Their behavior hadn't changed one bit in the years since I'd been kicked out of their home. They just wanted to manipulate me into doing what they wanted. I told them flat out that they were insane to think that I would just give up my kids to someone they would consider a stranger. My mother started crying, claiming that I owed them for the care they gave me before I moved out. The fact that they were gaslighting me into thinking that I'd left on my own accord had me leave the lawyer's office. My lawyer advised me to document any interaction that my family had with me if they continued to be an issue. And yeah guys, I would say these parents deserve the gold medal in gaslighting Olympics. Honestly, I would rather have enemies than have parents like this. It is so sad. And by the way, if you enjoy the XXL relationship stories, then please don't forget to like the video and post a comment because that would help me tremendously. Either way, I returned home that day to let my wife know what was going on, and I went to bed that night praying that that day would be the last time I heard from my family. But unfortunately, that was not the case. August turned to September and the twins entered first grade. The excitement of seeing them enamored with the thought of being at a big school — our district has the pre-K and kindergarten kids in a small building and grades 1 through 4 in a larger building — had me and Lucy just as excited to drop them off each day. I want to say it was around the middle of the month when I got a phone call from the school right before I headed out to pick them up. Me: hello, secretary, hello Mr. K, this is Miss Kim from XXX Elementary. How are you this afternoon? Me: I'm well. I was just about to get in the car to pick up the twins. Is everything okay? I didn't miss an early dismissal, did I? Secretary: no sir, it's a normal day today. I wanted to call you to ask if you had forgotten to update the pickup documents. I got 3 people here that say they are authorized for pickup for the twins. Me: no, only me and my wife are authorized for pickup. If there was anyone else, I would make sure to let you all know. Secretary: understood. Well, you might want to head down here quickly, they seem a bit anxious. I'll make sure that the twins stay in their classroom until you come to get them. Me: thank you, I'll be right over. And well, I was expecting a group of strangers to be trying to pick up my kids, but when I pulled up to the school parking lot, I saw my brother and my parents standing outside the entrance. The school's principal was blocking the door along with 2 other staff members. When I got up to where my family was, my brother started shouting about how the teachers were infringing on his familial right to see his niece and nephew. I cut in and told all 3 of them to leave immediately or I was gonna call the cops. My parents again tried to tell me about how horrible my brother's ex was treating him and how if he had a good relationship with his niece and nephew, he would look so good in the court's eye. I told them that it was not my problem and that my brother was not gonna have a relationship with my kids ever, especially if he pulled a stunt like that again. It took another threat of police before they finally left. The principal told me I could put in a document to exclude those 3 from ever picking up my kids again, and I did so on the spot. I took the kids home and tried to give them a nicer version of why they had to stay in their classroom for longer than usual. I made sure my wife was aware when I got home and apologized to her. She knew a bit more about my past than anyone else and didn't press, but seemed to understand when I told her that my family was not to be trusted. The next few weeks were pure hell. CPS called my home to report that they received a call regarding the physical and emotional abuse of my children and that my wife was supposedly unfit as a mother. I refuted it, of course, knowing that my brother, parents, or all 3 of them were trying to do something underhanded to get back at me. CPS still needed to do an investigation to make sure that everything was still alright in my home and told me that they would drop by at some point over the course of the next few weeks when everyone that lived in my household would be home. Of course, they didn't provide a date, so I grew anxious with each passing day. I found out through a parent from school that someone was making posts about me in the school social media groups claiming I was a neglectful parent. My wife got a call from her parents claiming that my parents had reached out to them to ask for help as I was being neglectful to my children and they wanted to help me. Apparently, the 2 couples met for lunch one weekend and my mother fed them a lie about how I had a mental illness that didn't allow me to love anyone and that I was hurting my children. My in-laws were skeptical even though they didn't know everything about my past relationship with my family, but my parents were insistent that I left them to suffer for years without contact. Each of these instances, starting from the letter I got from my family's lawyer, were documented. I had my in-laws send me text messages that my parents sent them claiming I was hurting my children. I asked if the school could send a copy of the security footage from the day my family tried to pick up my children to my lawyer. I screenshotted every fake account that was spreading lies about me on social media. I gave everything I got to my lawyer and he was able to do some digging of his own. As it turns out, my brother didn't just get divorced from his wife. No, he was actually a gambling addict and his wife filed because he spent so much of their money that their house was foreclosed for, not keeping up with mortgage payments. My parents were providing him money to try try and get his kids back, as well as fight against debt collectors. I'm still not sure what his plan was with my children, but I knew it was not good. My lawyer told me that I could definitely build a case, or at the very least file for harassment. I went with the latter since it meant less paperwork and less time that I had to deal with other lawyers that I knew my family would try to gaslight too. It still took a few weeks to get a cease and desist, but in that time things started to get better. CPS came to the house about 3 weeks after they informed me of the call they received. Me and my wife passed with flying colors, and although CPS cleared us, they did stress that if they received another call, they would visit again, but without providing us with notice. I did have to have a long and detailed conversation about my past with my wife and in-laws just to make sure they understood why I didn't have contact with my family at all. They were supportive, and the extent of the abuse made them all realize what bringing my family into their lives could mean. Once again, I felt like my wife's family was the loving group of people I wanted to have during my childhood, but I was glad to have them now, and that my children had such wonderful grandparents. My lawyer contacted my family's lawyer to provide the cease and desist. I expected that revelation to be met with a scene or something, but apparently my family and their lawyer were calm. As much as I wanted to think that everything was over now, I noticed that there was a car parked outside our home that did not belong to my neighbors. I just hope this doesn't get worse. Update to the story. I really wish I didn't have an update. For those who hadn't read my previous post, my mother, father and older brother were abusive towards me when I was a child. I was kicked out of my house and I was able to build a new life without them being a part of it. Regardless of all of that, I tried to keep up a normal routine for myself, Lucy and my children. We did not get any more calls from the school about strangers trying to pick up our kids, and I'd made sure to report each and every instance on social media about me and my wife being neglectful parents. I hadn't heard anything from CPS, which I hope meant that there hadn't been another call against us. For a few weeks, things seemed to have calmed down. I got the wonderful news that Lucy was pregnant with our third child. That hit like a ray of sunshine in all of the gloom that had been in our lives for months, especially with winter rolling in. The bits of hope and love we could find, we clung to. I was still the head of my tech consulting company, and we were working on a major deal with a client that would hopefully bring in far more business, and right when I began to believe that my family was done trying to get their hooks into my life, a letter arrived. It was addressed to my wife, no return address, and Lucy was a little shocked at what she found. She was upset when she called me into the living room after we put the kids to bed and showed me 7 photographs that were pictures of me and other women. Now, I could tell just by looking at them that the photos were just manipulated, since I would never ever cheat on my wife. My wife asked me what the photos were, and I told her that they were not real and had to be doctored. I could tell that Lucy wanted to believe me, but without actual proof, she was only seeing a betrayal. Then about a month later, I received a certified letter indicating that my mother and father were petitioning for custody of my children. I was to appear in court for a preliminary hearing in order for the request to be reviewed before it could go to family court. I did not want to keep it a secret from Lucy, afraid of what stress would do to her health as well as the child inside of her, but I wanted to make sure that she knew that I was being as honest as I could. So came the weeks of waiting for the hearing date, my wife still with me and helping me take care of the kids while I could tell her trust in me was wavering. The hearing was held, and my parents claimed that the business I'd owned and operated for over a decade was a front for illegal activities, that I'd made my money off of shady drug deals instead of actual consultation visits, and they also wanted to force the sale of my home, claiming that I had a verbal agreement with my brother about him getting the house before it hit the market. They also brought up the visit CPS made to my home. The judge gave me a deadline to compile evidence against the contrary, and I all but ran to my lawyer for help. The verbal agreement issue could be solved quickly, since there was no actual record of it occurring at a law office or notary, and my lawyer did want to comb through every inch of my business, following every document and contract to make sure there wasn't anything that could create a crack or something. He advised me to just try and proceed as normal for the time being, and I tried, I really did. I then got a call from the client I'd been hoping to bring in for more business, and they told me they felt unsure if I was giving them a good deal. Apparently they had gotten a call from a woman who claimed that my business was under investigation for fraud. I assured the client that although there was an investigation being conducted, I had all of their files documented properly. I even offered to meet with them to discuss the issue, and over the course of the next week I made sure to show them that there was nothing for them to worry about. CPS visited again, and like they promised, they hadn't provided a heads up, arriving with cops as well. They interviewed both of my children, an officer making sure my wife and I were sequestered in the kitchen during the process. When they were done, they told us that they would review what they gathered and visit again within the next 2 weeks. When the police and CPS left, my children were distraught, asking me if they were going away from me and their mother. I told them that they weren't, and I didn't sleep at all that night. I decided to put my sleeplessness into good use, deciding to look into the pictures that my wife had been sent. They were printed photos with a studio's name on the back of them, so I checked out their website and sent an email asking if there was a way to find out when the photos were taken or if they were doctored or something. I received a reply 2 days later telling me that if I was not the owner of these pictures, I couldn't request that information, so I went to the police and requested assistance. At the very least, I hoped they could get some sort of subpoena on the information to assist in the request for evidence that the judge wanted at the hearing. After another 2 weeks of waiting, which left me about 1 week before the second pre-trial hearing, I got my answer. The pictures had been manipulated. A camera tech at the shop was able to show the police the original files that someone had provided them, a lot of them pictures from my social media that were recolored and resized to include me in pictures with various women. I had the police tell the employee to send the files to my lawyer, and I spoke to my wife about them, and I was able to show her the original files. I walked through each of the 7 pictures that my face had been taken from and pasted onto another man's body, or that my entire figure was copied and pasted into a completely different setting. Lucy apologized and told me she didn't want it to be true, but the manipulations were very convincing. I forgave her, and for the first time in weeks I felt a peace settle in the house. My lawyer called halfway through the week to tell me that they'd worked with the police adjacent to my own request to find out more info about the photos, and they had also finished their investigation of my company and everything was in order. I felt confident that I had enough to build a case against my family. The next hearing date brought well-deserved justice to my family and my business. The pictures that were ordered to be doctored came from my brother. My lawyer presented my notarized documentation from my purchase of the house and challenged my parents to produce something that indicated I gave ownership to my brother. When they couldn't, my lawyer also produced my carefully documented relationship with clients at my company, showing that I kept records and was in good standing in all aspects of my company, from taxes to regulatory inspections. I thought my family would fight, that they would try to push further, but after that court date, they completely withdrew their legal actions. I knew there was more going on, and I made sure to let my lawyer know that I would probably be reaching out to him in the near future. But still, I tried to keep my composure and assure my children that everything was fine. Well, everything was fine until one day when my son told me he had seen a man outside the schoolyard beckoning him to come closer. Update, last update for you all, since this marks what I hope to be the end of my family nonsense. And then OP posts a small or rather large recap that I won't read here, once again talking about how awful the family was to him. And then he says, Lucy took the last 2 months of her pregnancy on bed rest per the doctor's orders, and we welcomed a healthy baby girl, a little sister for the twins. I allowed the pride and excitement of a new child to get rid of some of the worries I had about my family coming in and ruining everything. I wanted my wife and my kids to be happy, and for about 2 months we were. I hadn't heard anything from my family, but the twins did mention seeing someone trying to coax them from the schoolyard while they were waiting for me to pick them up. Because of the incident with my family that happened before, I had made sure to all but drill into their heads that Lucy and I are the only ones who will be picking them up, and if someone else tried to do this, they were to go back into the school and have a teacher call me. The school knew that Lucy and I were the only ones authorized for pickup too, and made sure to note down that my brother, mother and father were to be reported to police immediately if they were seen on school property. The man that my kids had seen was not my brother or my father, but I had a feeling that my family was still behind it. I requested that my children stay inside during pickup just in case. Later that week during work, I got a phone call from the school secretary about halfway through the school day. A man had entered the school with paperwork indicating that he was the new pickup for my son and daughter. Because I hadn't made any notes or contacted the school about the new policy, she wanted to confirm with me that this was something that I had authorized. I told her it wasn't and asked her to get the name of the man who had brought in the paperwork, but as soon as the secretary asked for his name, he left the building. I immediately went over to the school and the secretary assured me that my kids were in another part of the building when the man arrived. I went to the police that afternoon letting them know what happened, and they told me they'd be able to investigate, and went to the school the next day to get security camera footage. The secretary had the forged documents the man had attempted to use, and the police took those as evidence. I told my wife what happened when I brought the kids home. She took me into the bedroom and broke down, crying and asking me when all of this was gonna stop. I wanted to have answers for her, but at the time I could only tell her that the police were doing their jobs. I was nervous to send my kids back to school the next day, but I wanted them to feel like everything was alright and normal. I didn't want to scare them more than they already had been. The CPS visits were rough on them, and my daughter consistently had nightmares that she was gonna be taken away from me and Lucy. Giving them a stable school life was the least I could do until whatever my family was planning was taken care of. The school reported to the police and to me that, over the course of the next 2 weeks, there was a maintenance van sitting just outside of the school parking lot that would appear once school started and disappear once school ended. The police were contacted and a patrol car outside the school gates was enough to dissuade the van from parking there. The police got the plate number of the van and matched it to the name that was on the forged documents. It was Henry W., name changed, who was a petty thief that had a few marks on his record for shoplifting. The van was one he had purchased legally, so the police didn't have much else to go on. But then 2 days after the police pulled the squad car from the school, Henry made a move. I was at work right in the middle of a meeting when my mother and father burst into my office demanding that they speak with me. I told them to leave and had one of the meeting attendees call security. They were ranting about what a horrible person I was, how I was keeping them from seeing their grandchildren, and didn't deserve to be a parent at all. The entire time they were yelling and making a fuss, the phone to my office was ringing, security was able to escort them out and I thought about calling the police for harassment, but my phone was still ringing. When I picked it up, it was my wife. She was at the school for the twins' field day, the cops were there, Henry, another man, and my brother were being arrested for attempted kidnapping. I headed over to the school as quickly as I could. The officers were already working through witness statements with other members of the faculty and students, so I was able to sit down with my wife and kids to talk about what happened. The school's field day took place at various areas outside of the school, including the school parking lot. During one of the events that the twins were taking part in, the maintenance van drove into the parking lot, the side of the van opened, and Henry ran out to try and grab my son. My wife saw what was happening and a few of the parents ran towards Henry to try and catch him. A teacher called the police and another teacher ran to their car to block the van from getting out of the parking lot. With the van unable to move and Henry being held down, the other two people in the van attempted to make a run for it. The parking lot had a fence around it, making it hard for them to find an opening to escape through and giving the cops time to arrive and chase them down before they could climb over the fence. And that was when my wife recognized my brother as one of the other men. It was clear, even from the security camera footage from the school, that it was an attempted kidnapping regardless of what Henry and my brother had to say about it. The police sent everyone home after a few hours and assured me and my wife that they would let us know what they found in their sweep of the vehicle and what they would get from questioning my brother and his accomplices. My wife and I had to calm the twins down and tell them that they were safe now and that they shouldn't be afraid of going back to school the next day. It took 3 days for them to get us down to the station for the full explanation, at least based on the evidence they had so far. An officer first asked us what my brother's relationship was to us, and I went over a bit of the nearly year-long case of harassment and attempts to gain custody of my kids. The officer told us that they had found a large amount of money in the van along with passports and fake IDs for not just my brother, but for my kids. They still had to get more questioning done, but it seemed from their preliminary report that my brother was attempting to kidnap my kids and leave the country. With the video evidence, it was enough to hold him, but they would still need to investigate further before a case went to court, if only to get the full story. I called my lawyer to let them know what was happening. At the very least, my brother was not going to be bothering me and my family for the foreseeable future, so I let the cops do their work and my lawyer providing updates from their own findings. 2 weeks later, I got a call that my brother was going to plead guilty for attempted kidnapping as well as provide evidence that my parents were the ones that hired Henry to help try to kidnap my kids. I'm gonna try and keep things as neat and cohesive as possible because the case to prove my parents were the masterminds behind this unraveled into an almost year-long series of hearings and court dates that brought a lot more things to light. I found out that my parents all but drained their savings to support my brother, and the money in the van was from their retirement fund. They would come into my workplace the day of the kidnapping attempt to try and keep me from hearing about it until after the fact. I guess they thought that if they distracted me, then I couldn't go to the police to identify my brother, but they had not counted on my wife being there. As for the full explanation as to why they hired Henry, they didn't really have one. Henry was a friend of my brother, and since he had a van, they thought they would take advantage of it and his past to see if he would help them take my children. In the end, my brother got his sentence halved for his cooperation, only spending 4 years in prison instead of 8. My parents were charged with attempted kidnapping and conspiracy, which landed them both 10 years each. The final decision was made about 2 months ago, and the stress that my family had felt over the course of the last year finally seems to be settling. My kids are not afraid of going to school anymore. We are taking each day as it comes, and with my youngest daughter's birthday coming up, trying to celebrate all of the good things that have happened in our lives. I'm hoping that the memories of the kidnapping and CPS visits will seem like just a bad dream to my family as the years go on. And the next one is a more funny story from r/Petty Revenge to lighten the mood a little bit, and it is titled "Band Teacher Told Us We Were Failures, so we rickrolled him at the winter concert." So for context, every year the students in the honors music classes put on a concert for teachers and parents. This is completely student-led, so no teachers know what the songs are. We have a senior who's basically in charge of everything, and she was given permission to approve our songs and make sure it was nothing inappropriate, so it could be a true surprise. My band teacher is problematic to say the least. He has a short temper, and I don't think he really wanted to be a teacher if I'm being honest. Anyway, he got mad at us in class one day and blew up at us, saying stuff like how we were hopeless, had no talent. Not true, in case you were wondering. So we got plotting. My friends L and N had the idea of rickrolling the audience, so we got to composing. Basically, we started off playing some traditional band piece, then the music stopped and the tenor sax played the intro to "Never Gonna Give You Up," and it went from there. It was epic. The look on the band teacher's face was priceless. That was one concert for the history books. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.